Alright, so Paladin. Paladin in Classic Hearthstone, I think a lot of people put near the bottom if they're going to rank all the classes and their efficacy. I actually don't think it really belongs quite at the bottom, maybe somewhere in the middle of the pack. It's pretty hard to tell. But I got 4 lists here I want to take a look at. And before I even get into them, I just want to highlight one kind of big thing here. I think there's a lot of good here. This is all real good, but I have a really hard time saying exactly how good any of these lists are, or ranking them or anything like that. I think every single one of these is going to be legend viable. I just have a tough time saying which ones will just get you the low legend, which ones will let you climb high, but we'll get into it a little bit here as we go. So I'll just start with this Control Paladin. Now this came from Sakrasta, longtime viewer, and he's a huge fan of Paladin. He's tried Paladin in almost every form you can imagine, all kinds of different cards, and so when he brings me a new Paladin list that he's worked on, I know it's come through a lot of iterations, a lot of testing, and this is the one that he gave me. I've had the most success with. I know when he played with it, he was boasting a very high win rate, which I do think equalized, but still very, very high. It's kind of what you'd expect from Control Paladin. You know, it's got the big boys. It's got Tyrion. It's got Avenging Wrath, a single Kodo, which you see a lot to combo with Aldor and Humility. But what it actually does that a lot of Paladins struggle with is it does well against aggro. It does well against stuff like Zoo. It just seems to be the right amount. Having these Humilities to combo with Pyromancer, as well as the Kodo, having 2 Doomsayers. Obviously Peacekeeper can be good if you're playing it against big things or small things. 3/3 body's not bad. The bit of heal here, it really works very smoothly. I never feel like it's super draw dependent. You know, if I'm obviously you can get unlucky, but it's not the kind of thing where I feel like there's 1 or 2 cards I really need to be able to counter it. So does a very good job of countering those things in the early game. It's got kind of the staples in the late game, and then the hero power can just grind things out. If you're playing against a control warrior, you know, just keep spamming guys onto the board. They demand attention. They've got to be dealt with, and yeah, you'll win those real long grindy games. It also doesn't have a lay on hands, which means when a control class that you're playing against is getting down to that sort of, you know, do they want to draw, do they not, because they're threatening to fatigue themselves, you don't have that issue. Instead, you just get a couple of draws from the Drake. You know, maybe you're hitting a rogue or a warrior with Harrison, something like that. It's pretty good. I should also mention this Tinkmaster is there, I think, mostly for rogue. It's just a way to more consistently deal with a concealed auctioneer. Obviously, you can use things like Equality and Consecrate. On 6, it's going to work. A little bit tougher to combo it with Avenging Wrath because they might get it out too early. But as long as you keep their board clear, you can make sure that you snipe it with the Tinkmaster, preventing them from drawing cards. But it also works well against things like Sylvanas and Karen. So, yeah, very good deck. Probably the best control variant that I've played. Very satisfied with it. I think it'll for sure get you to legend. You'll be able to climb pretty well with it, so highly recommend it. I'm gonna go here to Crusher's Midrange Paladin next. Good chance you've seen this. You know, special shout out to Crusher HS on Twitch and YouTube. Very talented player, and I think that is part of the reason why I struggle to rank where this deck sits exactly. He's so talented, and he plays this deck at a very high level. He's played it at high legend, but I don't know whether I should attribute that to the deck or just his level of play. I have played it myself. I have had success with it. It's kind of what you would expect from a mid-range Paladin. You know, there's the curve there, but basically you're going to be wanting to play things on curve. Worgen Infiltrator does a very good job of dealing with a lot of that early aggression, especially if you can follow it up with an Argent Protector. you know, bump into a Flame Imp, a Leper Gnome, something like that. It's going to do an amazing job. But you've also got this Blood Knight, which you can use to pull your own Divine Shields away, which is sometimes questionable, sometimes really good. If it's pulling an Argent Squire early in the game, I think you're usually happy with it. But as well, a lot of people run Argent Squire, so you've got targets in enemy decks to hit, and the odd Sunwalker in there as well. So, yeah, not a lot to say about the deck. Pretty typical mid-range. It's well constructed. At least one person has played it at very high legend, and yeah, I've had a lot of success with it. So if you like the mid-range style, I think this will suit you quite well. And next, this is another one that's come from Sakurasta, the resident Paladin expert. This one is very unique, and I think at a glance, it's like very surprising. You don't see a lot of Argent Commander, though it's in there sometimes. You know, maybe a Druid is running it. I've seen a few Zoos run it. But Stormwind Knight, you never see. Sword of Justice, you very rarely see. And it does the same thing to deal with early aggression. It tries to secure the board with minions, as opposed to playing the catch-up game with things like Doomsayers and that. But Sword of Justice in this deck feels like it can go off a lot, and it gives a lot of very important stat buffs. What do I mean by that? I mean, turning a 2/5 into a 3/6 charger is just such a nice breakpoint. 3 attack is enough to kill a lot of stuff as a follow-up to the Sword of Justice. You can also bop stuff for that 1 extra damage if that's what you need. 6 health, also very resilient to a lot of things. It kind of works with these early minions securing the board, and if you end up getting it later, a lot of times you can get immediate value by throwing these things down on the same turn that you play Sword of Justice. So I know it looks a little bit strange, but I had a ton of success with this when I first started playing it. It is something that equalized a bit more. You know, I was still sitting above a 50% win rate in some of my later streams playing this deck. But in the earlier ones, I think I was up around like 70-something%. It was ridiculously good for me. So yeah, you're going to be using a lot of these chargers and the early board presence to dominate the board and push damage to face, but sometimes you'll find that you lose the board. You know, it does happen against things like Zoo. You know, you can't always guarantee that you're going to be able to claim it. But things like Stormwind Knight and Argent Commander charging in, even Avenging Wrath, you know, spreading 8 damage on a big board. These are tools that really help you re-secure the board. It'll swing things back into your favor in 1 or 2 turns. And everything else, I think, is just a pretty standard, you know, falls into that kind of mid-range style. So yeah, you'll be playing things on curve a lot with this deck as well. But yeah, effective deck. Hard to exactly place just how good it is, but this can get you to legend. Absolutely can. And I think it'll do a lot better than what you'd expect for some cards that you just really don't see. And then finally, this aggro list. I think a lot of people call it like Shockadin or something, and then there's a lot of versions of it. Not exactly sure the origins of it. I think it's a WoW thing. But yeah, this is the list that I've got here. Very, very aggressive to the face, rarely trading on the board kind of deck. This plays in a similar style to something like Face Hunter, where you want to send almost all your damage to the face, but there's a few exceptions where, you know, maybe you can drop an Argent Protector on a Worgen and you get a very efficient early game trade, or Argent Squire can do that a lot with the bubble. Even Bluegill Warrior hitting something with 2 health can often be very, very good. But for the most part, you want to play as much as you can, as fast as you can. Then you're going to refill your hand with Divine Favor. You know, against almost every single opponent, they're going to be spending, or you're going to be spending your cards a lot faster than they are. So you can get a ton of value out of this a lot of the time. But you've also got this Hammer of Wrath to draw with. A lot of times you're going to be sending it to the face anyway. 3 damage is not great. Normally, I don't like this card, but it does just need a little bit more draw. So if you were going to go for any kind of replacement in this deck, which I've tried to do. I think you still have to find another way to get draw with maybe something like a Loot Hoarder. Perhaps that's a fair replacement as well. But yeah, not really a lot to talk about. This has some favorable matchups in things like Handlock, if you're seeing a lot of that. Very good against Druid, right? Equality is just so good at getting through big taunts. You don't even have to worry about putting silences into the deck. Just very, very strong with that. Can do very well against Miracle Rogue as well. Although in my experience, I think Miracle Rogue is able to clean up a lot of these minions pretty effectively. So I'm not sure if the win rate is quite as high as against those decks that run big taunts. But again, it's a deck that can get you to Legend. It's very fast for climbing. So if you're looking for something, early in the season just to blow through those lower ranks, it's very good for that. And yeah, I've seen people make it to Legend. I've seen people play it at pretty high levels of Legend. So quite good. So yeah, that is Paladin in a nutshell. Like I said, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle as far as all the classes go. But I do think that given these 4 decks, there's a lot more that you can do with Paladin than what I see the average player doing. I think there's a lot more that is viable. You see some aggro, you see some control, but I don't see these particular lists run as is. Highly recommend giving them a try for whatever style you like to go with, whatever your preference is. Because yeah, there is quite a wide range of what you can play for Paladin, and I think you'll do quite well on ladder with just about any of them.